I'd like to welcome on stage my good friend and a fellow IITian, Abhi Mukherjee from Seracap Ventures.
Thank you. Thank you, Amit. Am I audible? Yep. Good morning. Today, and I will be moderating the next session, but before we do that, I would like to kind of acknowledge our volunteers, the unsung heroes. They are the true heroes. 40 of them who made this possible. And you know what? The funny thing was there were 2 women volunteers. One of them is a double IITian. Where is Smita? Where is Smita? Okay. She's still working. She's still volunteering, I guess. But those 2 were really kind of heavy on the remaining 38. But we want more. We want more representation from the other side of the power community, and we want more women volunteers kind of joining us going forward. But at this stage, I would love if you can just please join me and thank them. So one big round of applause for the volunteers, please. Thank you. Now, Wi-Fi check, the QR code that's going to come up shortly, that's also check. The one more thing that I would like to kind of highlight is that when we were thinking about the topic AI and us, the way my mind kind of deciphered it is you cannot spell brain without AI and conscious without us. So think about it. It's very important that the artificial intelligence is not absence of intelligence. It's how you take intelligence that is provided by something that's going to augment and help you kind of make things better. On that note, it gives me distinct honor and pleasure to bring up my friend and an amazing executive who has changed the course of disruption and monetization strategy when it comes to the predictable, innovative, and personalized care and patient outcome at Mayo Clinic. The Chief Operating Officer at Mayo Clinic Platform, Mr. Maneesh Goyal. Yeah,
Good morning.
Yeah, they have to do better, I guess. Yeah.
By the way, before we get started, your house must have been really challenging between a mom that's a math teacher and a former IIT alum. But it got me thinking, sorry to jump right in, but you know, my father-in-law came over yesterday, and we were just talking about the impact of immigrants on the United States, and it got me thinking that you have to feel proud as a set of institutions coming from India, the amount of impact, the number of incredible inventions, leaders, value that you as an institution have created. So just a quick round of applause because it is forgotten.
Thank you, Maneesh, and thanks, Durga, for that note because I have to be nicer to my son. I have to put a mental note. Well, on that note, now that you are Chief Operating Officer and you are really kind of disrupting as to how you're monetizing the concept of AI into the healthcare system, I'm sure you would have not started as a DJ in your earlier career.
Yes, that was to pay the bills, actually.
Oh, just to pay the bill. Oh, okay, that's it. When I heard that, I was like, wow, okay, that's fun and interesting fact about you that I had to bring up. Not many people know that. But many people know that how you have orchestrated the change and your team has been phenomenal in creating the industry's first platform of its kind to kind of leverage the anonymized, de-identified data. So tell us more about Mayo Clinic Platform, where does it fit, and what really was the genesis of this thought process?
Yeah, you bet. So first of all, thank you for having me on. Hopefully coming out of this, you see that we're transitioning, we're at this interesting inflection point in healthcare. I think of it actually as the cell phone moment. The cell phone unlocked this pent-up economic value that was existing across the world, this pent-up disparity in communication, intelligence, education, everything. And I think we're at that moment in healthcare. I truly believe that. And so this whole journey started, so a little bit background on Mayo Clinic. We are a health system based in Rochester, Minnesota. We have hospitals in Jacksonville, Florida, and Phoenix, Arizona, with a clinic in London. We see about 1.2 to 1.3 million patients a year from 150 different countries and all 50 states. We practice this particular kind of medicine and have for 150 years. It's called integrated medicine. So when you come to Mayo Clinic, and you can all relate if you've ever had a healthcare episode, when you come to Mayo Clinic, your diagnosis is wrapped around with all the necessary specialties, and those physicians then confer and create a unified diagnosis. So we see a lot of tertiary and quaternary patients, or complex or serious patients. At Mayo, we are the largest whole organ transplant healthcare provider in the world. And so hopefully you never need our services, but we've been number one as a healthcare provider in the world for 10 plus years. Mayo is also a research institution, so we have 5,000 researchers. We do about $1.5 billion of novel research. And it's different because our research institution and our care institution are tied at the hip. So what happens is any innovation that happens on the research side is immediately put into practice in a patient-safe way. And I'll come back to how AI fits into all of that. Because we don't want to create basic science research. What we're doing is actually creating research that's going to impact patient lives soon, immediately, next week. And then we have an educational institution as well. So we have 2 medical schools and several accreditation programs, including nursing. About 81,000 people doing about 15, going to about 19 billion in top line. So we're one of the largest healthcare providers, but most people haven't really heard of us. So our current CEO, so the second fact about Mayo is everybody is employed. Everybody's salaried. There are no bonuses, no stock options. Everybody gets the same inflation-adjusted raise every year. So you have to be there because everybody that works there could make 2 to 3 times what they're making elsewhere in the market. The reason people come to Mayo Clinic and work as physicians, nurses, techs, janitors, COOs, is that we have a unique set of capabilities because of what I just mentioned. A research institution, an education institution, and a care institution. Our CEOs and all of our leadership positions are tenured, meaning every 8 years they transition. So you got 8 years to do your thing, and then you go back into the pool of either providing care or something. And so it creates this harmony in the organization because you're not tapped down. You have to get buy-in across the organization. And our current CEO, who's been in the role for a little over 4 years, his mandate was we want to re-architect healthcare globally. So this is where AI fits in. For us, AI is a tool. And we've just been, the world is recognizing, or the healthcare providers in the world are recognizing what AI can do. We've been building it for 5 years. So what he asked us to do is to say, how do we transform healthcare? What does transformation mean? How do you get healthcare today? You get out, you get in your car, assuming you have an appointment, you go to a physical facility, you get care. That person that you're getting care from has been trained somewhere and is practicing the same kind of medicine that they trained, plus anything that they learned along the way. Majority of physicians practice the same kind of medicine that they were trained on, unless they're at a teaching institution or are self-motivated. So that presents a challenge, right? Because then you start to produce the same results. They might be good or okay. And it also creates these fixed cost pockets all over the world, right? So giant buildings, expensive marble-laden buildings that we all love to go to because we think they're safe and clean and we're going to get better. And it generally works, but the problem is, remember, the hospital was created 150, a little over 160 years ago to control field-borne infections, right? So that means me doing some surgery or some operation on you while you're in the field, whether it be your home or otherwise, presents risk. So we said, let's bring everybody in, and in a sterile environment, the outcomes were better. Okay, so we've gotten really good at that, and now what we're finding is that certain things about keeping you in the hospital are actually bad. So one form of transformation is to educate our physicians, nurses, administrators to use the latest knowledge in a better way. So the idea of constant trading, changing the phrase, the standard of care. You hear that a lot in healthcare, the standard of care. The standard of care is how I was trained. Well, what if the standard of care was how I was trained, but all the available knowledge up until this point? That changes the equation. So if healthcare transformation is about re-architecting how the financial system works in healthcare, right? That means producing less buildings that employ a lot of people and instead spinning these up as needed, pushing care into the home, and getting more information in front of the physicians, nurses, and administrators on a timely basis. How do you accomplish that? And that was a challenge that Dr. Farouj, our CEO, asked us. So I joined the organization 5 years ago, wrote the business plan along with my colleague. The second fact of Mayo Clinic is every leadership position has a physician and an administrative partner. Your colleagues, including our CEO and CAO, operate as a dyad. That's across every leadership position at Mayo. And that creates a symbiosis so that you're not creating a really great scientific product that has no business value or vice versa. Pretty thoughtful if you think about it, and that's the way Mayo's operated for 150 years. So you threw this mandate out and said, I want to make, in my 8 years, what I want to do is to transform how we deliver healthcare. And not only that, I want you guys to figure out how we impact half of the healthcare providers globally. So we see 1.2 million patients a year. There are a lot more patients across the world. How do we make the patient that comes to Mayo Clinic get better care? But how do we make the patient that is sitting in a clinic in Ajmer, India, where I'm from, get better care? We can't pick them up and transport them over to Mayo Clinic, but we can make that care provider better. And that's our goal. And we're going to use the platform models to do it and certainly leverage AI. And I could talk more about that.
Wonderful. That would be a perfect segue for us to understand, because it takes a village to raise a child, and you cannot do this on your own. There must be a robust collaborative partnership ecosystem that you rely on, including the patients and the other actors in the healthcare space to provide you that feedback loop, complete the loop so that you can get better version of what it is right now. So keeping these two perspective in terms of the partners and what value they add in terms of enhancing the feedback loop, how do you see this working out?
Yeah. So one of the things that you're all familiar with if you're interacting with the healthcare system is everybody builds proprietary things. They build proprietary networks, proprietary data silos, proprietary care models, because they believe that their way of doing business, their way of delivering care or services is better. Mayo's no different, but one of the things we said is maybe we become better if we work collaboratively, right? We might be really good, but maybe we can get even better if we actually collaborate. And so that's the ethos of platform, is to not just build this ivory tower and make it another floor higher at Mayo Clinic, but actually create a worldwide ecosystem. And that's the journey that we've been on. And I'll be very careful to articulate what is vision state and what is current state, because there's certainly a lot of vision that we've got ahead of us, but there's a lot of things to be proud of. So the first thing that we did 5 years ago, 5 years was a long time ago in our lifetimes, a lot has happened, but we put 100% of our clinical data in the cloud. So at that time, if you go back and search for Google or Ascension or Mayo Clinic, you'll see articles around, oh no, our patient data is now with Google. Well, we all know that there's a lot of different Googles, and Google as a cloud provider is different than Google as a search engine. But I mentioned that Mayo took a big leap by putting 50 petabytes of data in the cloud. And this is all PHI data, regulated and consented, and our patients trust us with it. The second thing we said is, how do we unlock knowledge in here? It's not about the data. we don't want to sell data. We don't want to have an insurance company say Maneesh's, mortality curve or risk basis is this, so we got to adjust his premium. We don't want to go down that road. What we want to do is to unlock the knowledge that exists with the 10 million patients that Mayo has seen. But the problem is, if you've ever negotiated a data contract with a healthcare provider, it's or was anywhere from 6 to 9 months at the shortest, typically 18. We said, how do we get around that without giving up control or risk any patient or being in the front page of the Wall Street Journal? We all worry about that. And so we actually created a company out of Boston that did nothing but look at all of our structured and unstructured data and de-identify it in something we called hiding in plain sight. And the novelty of this is it takes the entire clinical history and removes all the pronouns or identifying factors. So for me, it would be anything like my title, my employer, my street address, physical address, social security number. But more than that, Mayo's physicians and nurses do an incredible job capturing clinical notes. So within the clinical notes, there are things that are identifiers about me, right? Including when I might have had an acute event that might have been in a paper. I haven't, but I'm just giving it as an example. So that hiding in plain sight, what we do is go in there and replace all of that with fiction. So instead of Maneesh Goyal, it's John Smith. Instead of COO, it's CIO. Instead of Mayo Clinic, it's Harvard General. Pick a name, right? Those things are irrelevant, but it retains the clinical history. Then we get a third party to certify as de-identified. And that allows us to treat this essentially as de-identified data. Now, the reason we can do that is we never let anybody get control over it. It always sits in our cloud, but now we can enable much more rapid innovation. So from 4 years ago when we started that journey to today, we've taken over 200 partners with tens of gigabytes and petabytes of data to do novel algorithm creation, solution creation that are in practice at Mayo. There are over 200 algorithms that are in practice today at Mayo based on this construct. And then we've partnered with hundreds of companies to be able to let them mine intelligence. And I'll give you examples what that means. One concrete example. When you come to Mayo and get a general surgery, you put on a 12-lead ECG, and that waveform is captured. Now, obviously, if there's no cardiac event, no cardiac issue, nobody pays attention to that. 3 years ago, we went and looked at all of that data and said, can we identify certain diseases that are asymptomatic, meaning you don't get knowledge of that until an adverse event, usually fatal. We trained an algorithm, we ran a clinical trial, and that algorithm now operates on every patient coming to Mayo Clinic that gets a 12-lead ECG, whether they have any cardiac issue or not. And it just flags for this condition. It's called low ejection fraction, where your heart just stops pumping enough volume. And we've saved 50 lives. So not a big number, but now it's sitting in the background and saving other lives. That's one example. And so I can count through hundreds of examples that we're now implementing. The answer to your question is we said, great, that's Mayo Clinic. We've improved our 1.2 million patients' lives quality outcomes. We're already really great, but we've improved care quality. How do we make it better? Second thing we recognize is all data is biased. The 10 million patients that we have historically, they're biased. They come from our 3 different geographies, or a small pocket of patients come from all across the world. But how we deliver care, what tools we use, present bias. So we went around the world and said, can we create a federated data network of other high-quality institutions to do exactly the same thing, but then in a virtual model, connect all that data together? So we have 32 million patients now with 9 partners representing 40% of the top 10 institutions in the world that have joined. So we have the number 1 system in Korea, Singapore, one to be announced in New York, Israel, South America, Africa, Pakistan, and India. So the India one and Pakistan one have not been announced. Why is that interesting? Is now you can actually, if you do analysis and training on this data set, you've got a global data set. So the likelihood of you getting a better product, whatever it is better. And we've created an ecosystem where all these institutions benefit because they are now getting access to the same data. So if they're producing something, they're also getting better. So that concept of not just doing it for ourselves, but enabling others to benefit has been part of our ethos. The last piece of the puzzle is to enable all that innovation that's happening on this platform to be distributed in a seamless manner. Because, again, if these 11 institutions across the globe are using it, they're already the organizations that already have great quality care. How do we improve the quality care of that critical access hospital down the road or that community health worker, have a world away? And that's the part we've implemented. And there we're at 45 million lives that we've integrated into the platform. And why I think it's a cell phone moment is we're getting to the point where you can have a nurse administrator, or even a community health worker deliver care in pockets where you don't have enough physicians or specialists, so you're not left with nothing. And so, I think, we're on our way to impacting billions of lives.
That's wonderful. Very, very, very inspiring. I know as I look at the clock, we are reaching towards the tail end of the conversation, and I want to remind folks, well, the Slido code is right up there. You can put your questions on also the QR on the on these old school style in the light of AI conference. We are going to use this. Before we get into this, Maneesh, not every time a project is a success. There are always those challenges, those business models that don't work. Not everything is hunky-dory at times. However, I'm very sure there has to be some kind of thought on the ROI in terms of this AI project. Given that Mayo Clinic is far ahead of its other folks in the same space when it comes to data and compute, because that sets you apart, the data. It's the secret sauce for making your AI. And those who are maturing their models on the axis that you have created also kind of get that extra edge, unfair advantage, if I may say so. But there are other instances when it doesn't work. There are some challenges that you have not factored in. So if you can just quickly kind of share a little bit of those gotcha moments, that would be wonderful, and I'll get onto the other questions.
Yeah, so we had several those gotcha moments, those moments where I'm going to get fired today moments. We've all been there. Year 2 of our existence, we've going through our de-identification process. And to understand if you've got a de-identified data set is really hard when it's unstructured. You can't read everything. So you have to invent tools to check if it's de-identified, and that's recursive, fairly difficult to do. So at some point in our year 2 of our existence, somebody discovered a word that looked like PHI. And it brought us to a halt. For 6 months, we were trying to figure out if this was indeed PHI, because we had commercial partners. And that could have been a massive event that we needed to disclose. What's interesting is that what we discovered is that the hiding in plain sight, the replacing of pronouns and places, et cetera, was being conflated with actual person. So it took us a long time to convince ourselves that this was not actual de-identified data. And the reason is that in this system, no one group, no one person, no one organization has access to PHI or de-identified data at the same time. So that presents a challenge of how do you actually verify that this is all PHI. So it took us a while. Learning lesson, and so now we've got automated processes that check constantly. I think the other things that we're working through is there are large players in the space. Somebody asked the question, who's going to be successful in AI? Who knows? But the Googles, the Amazons, the Metas, the Epic of the world, they have massive footprint and so hence have massive control. And I think that's going to be one of our challenges as we try to scale our ambitions.
Very well. So now we'll move into more like a sort of kind of rapid fire.
Yeah.
I'll start with this one, archaic, and then we'll go to the modern. Mayo Clinic is so vast. What kind of resistance did you get from IT and other departments in your journey?
Oh, that's a loaded question. So
Rapid fire.
So real quick, I sold into Mayo Clinic, I sold into health systems in my prior job, and what I realized is that you can't build a software company inside of an academic medical center. So one of the things we got agreement from the organization when we were structured is they gave us 10 years of funding, and then we were left alone. So we were able to go partner, we were able to build our own team, almost like a startup inside of Mayo Clinic. And that is the only way we've been successful. Now we're getting a little more closely integrated because we're at scale, but that's the way we did it. It's a fair question.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
The next one is about the data silos and ownership, and anonymity is potential roadblock to AI advances. So in your view, how does it impact US, which is regulated ecosystem, competitiveness against centralized systems like what we have in China?
So I think AI is going to, I think data is going to be fragmented in general. I think the architecture that was on the screen earlier is the right way. No, you don't have to have centralized data. You just need a way to get the right level of compute to the data. So our approach is to follow some standard rules. One, don't get vendor lock-in anywhere. So we've been very careful that we don't get lock-in at the cloud layer, at a single ERDID vendor. We've already started to spin up another company to have parallel paths. Because if we're going to be around, if this is going to re-architect healthcare, you can't be taken down because one company goes out of business or gets acquired or changes their business model, including these large companies like Google or Meta or others. So I think that's an important component. Does that answer your question? I want to be quick.
No, it does. It does.
Yeah.
How far are we out from patients getting personalized medicine and healthcare based on their genomics, personal disease conditions? I like this information because we have invested in one of the companies, predictive, that is changing this very, but I would want you to address this.
Yeah, I mean, we're there at the end of the day. And I alluded to it earlier. We have this saying inside of Mayo Clinic that AI is not going to replace physicians or nurses, but physicians and nurses who choose not to engage with AI will be replaced by physicians and nurses who do. Right. It's sort of like saying I'm not going to use an MRI machine for my neurology practice. Well, good luck, right? So I think that entire argument is purely born out of ignorance and or a belief that there's no business model. The business model is if it improves patient quality, somebody will figure out how to pay for it. And all of these solutions that we've seen improve patient quality. Give you another example beyond the cardiology example is we looked at all of our breast cancer patients, right? So a little over 1 million patients that we've seen in that space, and said, could we look at the genotype, phenotype, lifestyle of these patients and what chemotherapeutics we prescribed if they got them, and do an analysis of where actually works better. Because remember, clinical trials are always, they're not as heterogeneous as the patient population in the world. They're almost very homogeneous. And so these drugs that are approved, that are released on market, there's no guarantee that it will work for every genotype person on the planet. There isn't. And so if we can look at that data retrospectively and say, for this patient with this Korean descent, we should use this chemotherapeutic. And for this patient who's from South Asian descent, we use this chemotherapeutic. That's precision medicine. We're already there.
That's wonderful. The next question is really something I'm sure you love. It's about the regulatory challenges in the AI-driven healthcare. Do you foresee that something is being done to kind of improve in terms of how to get the policymakers on your side and then see from the same lens?
Yeah. So when we started this, we set off on a parallel path of actually impacting policy from day one. We speak every week with HHS and ONC because we want to leave this to the markets and let the healthcare, the regulatory bodies govern quality and the things that they're supposed to. But if they come in and say, this is how you're going to operate AI in healthcare, we're going to be, we're going to kill innovation. So far we've been able to do that. And one of the ways we got ahead of policy making, again, remember, we're a healthcare organization. We're a not-for-profit healthcare organization. So I'm not sitting here as a capitalist. I'm sitting here saying we're focused on delivering better care for every patient. That's it. So one of the things we did early was to have this notion of validation, or if you flip the backside of this thing, you'll see a nutrition label. Well, AI just needs that, either in a data card format or a model card format. And we created a consortium, the Coalition for Health AI, that today has over 4,000 companies, including the FDA and ONC, that are part of that. They established a framework, so they said, if you're going to produce something for healthcare that has AI, this is how you should communicate it. And Mayo set up what is effectively a lab, a clearance lab, to do analysis and say, this is Mayo's assessment of these solutions. By creating transparently and communicating it clearly, you now have the ability to let the regulators stay, okay, we've got the market's actually reacting positively. So that's the way we've been making sure that policymakers don't go too far into this.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your thoughts. I was looking at the time and darn, I wish I could have slowed it, but no. Thank you so much, Maneesh, for getting here and sharing your wonderful world of how you are leveraging AI as part of your disruption as well as monetization strategy, and also really focusing on patient outcomes and patient care. Thank you again for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
You can let go without it.